All right, well, welcome everyone to our webinar, and thanks for joining us. My name is Jim Jansen, and I'm an agricultural economist with the Center for Ag Profitability. Today is part of our center's weekly webinar series, which usually happens on Thursday each week around noon. And check out our website at cap.unl.edu for a full list of previously archived webinars in addition to upcoming webinars. This year, we marked the first publication of the Custom Rates Report with an emphasis on the livestock services and related operations in Nebraska. This report is a compilation of the biennial Nebraska Farm Custom Rates Report, which in addition to having some livestock, also has a lot of crop operations. So this year, we hope to have more detailed information, and Glennis McClure will be presenting the custom rates that has a specific emphasis on the livestock operations with over 50 custom services, such as feed preparation and delivery, land and pasture maintenance, fencing, hauling, and more. The results are from a statewide survey that were circulated earlier this year to those who either provide or pay for the custom services related to livestock. Today, we'll take a look at the new report and how custom operators and their potential customers can utilize or potentially apply this information. Presenting is the lead author, Glennis McClure, and a colleague I work with that is our farm and ranch management analyst with the Center for Ag Profitability. Glennis, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. So yes, good introduction there. I appreciate that Jim is on as a co-host today, and he may chime in with some additional information since we worked pretty closely together on this report, along with Dr. Parsons, Dr. Dennis, and Randy Sainer as part of the CAP team. These folks kind of provided some vision, some thoughts as we decided to create this particular survey, and hope, and hope to have good information to report back to you. And so those folks are named as part of our team in working on this. We also have quite a few acknowledgments. There's a great group of beef educators in Nebraska, and several of them provided some very, very good feedback as we were creating the survey. And so those folks are acknowledged as well in providing their assistance, in the report. So, all right, let's go ahead and move on. As far as how we're going to talk about this today is that we'll talk about some of the survey procedures, how we set that up, again, some of the observations, the information we received back, and also we're going to just talk about a couple examples of how we could use the survey information and how someone might think in terms of setting rates or in terms of what they may be paying for custom service rates across Nebraska, especially. So we have to keep in mind that we're always a few months, several months behind once we get the report done. So I would say we started really working on it late last year in 2022. The survey really went out around the first part of the year. So we started receiving information back from folks early in the year. So again, we're several months behind. And we always want to have folks consider that the rates reported in this survey, custom operators should consider their cost of machinery, labor, and fuel as they set their rates. So again, what they have as machinery complement is what they have, for labor rates, even their fuel costs, can be different, and they've got to figure that out as they set their own rates. So we always say, when you're looking at our custom rate survey, our regular biennial survey, or now this new survey, which we hope is a complement to the prior survey. And I guess the plan would probably be that every other year we would do a livestock related survey on the opposite year that we do our regular survey. But we always say that these should be used just as a guide when figuring rates to charge or to pay for. So general survey information. So we distributed paper copies of the survey And some of those were done at some of the meetings that our beef educators had. And also we had online surveys. I guess majority of those that completed or that we received back in complete surveys were actually those that were done online this time. So that was kind of new for us, whereas our other custom rate survey is really quite a bit more up by paper. So of course things may be changing with that, and obviously it saves us some cost in being able to offer that online and have people respond, so we don't have the mailing and the printing costs. So we received 91 completed surveys back. And on the survey itself, we had 96 different custom services that we asked about. So we didn't get information on all 96 of those services. Again, we did receive 53 results for 53 different custom services. So when you see the report, you'll see that. And also this time we did a little different in that our regular custom rate survey is directed towards those that are offering services and asking what their rates are, what they're charging. And this time around, we wanted to hear from those that were providing the services and charging for the services, and also those that were paying. So it was quite interesting, I think, that we had almost 50-50, 54% of the responses came from operators that provided services, and 46% came from those that pay for custom services. So I think that's, if you think about it, and we did not separate those out in our report. So therefore it's a blend. So when you look at those rates, you'll see a blend of those of what they charge and what those of folks that pay. And so, a lot of times folks might say, well, if I'm actually the one providing services, I might actually report, a little higher rate, and those that are paying might want the lower rate. So again, if you blend the two, perhaps we've got some pretty good information. And you can find that report on the cap.unl.edu website, and the /custom rates and /livestock. So we do have that there. On that web page, you'll also be able to look at the 2022, our regular custom rates report. As Jim mentioned, that's really more crops focused, although we do again have a blend. We had some really new questions to ask that were related specifically to livestock services. But in addition, we asked again about hay, we asked again about fencing, which is on both surveys, because again, maybe we were reaching a different audience with this livestock related survey. And so we thought, of course, we'd want to ask some of those questions and see if we got similar responses or not. So as we do with our regular survey, and I say the regular survey is the regular biennial survey that's probably more crops oriented that we've done for years and years. The livestock survey, again, now being a new effort. But we generally report, or we ask folks from what part of the state are they reporting, as they send in their information, where are they coming from? And so we generally have divided that biennial survey with information from the 8 reporting districts, the Ag Statistics Service districts in Nebraska. And so we thought that would be the case, but again, you have to have enough numbers to be able to show some of that information. And we report when we get 3 or more responses, in a particular area. And so it worked out this time around with the numbers that we had, that we would just do a state summary. So we did not report on district by district. But I wanted to share with you that most of the responses that we got on this, of again, majority or whatever, came from 3 different districts. And so we got the most from the Northwest, Panhandle area of the state, the northern area, again, pretty livestock focused, livestock area, which makes sense, right? We also got quite a few from the eastern side of the state. We have quite a few, of course, different livestock systems, again, cow-calf folks there too. And we, as we do all across the state, but those were the 3 districts where we actually had most of the responses. Surprisingly enough, we had the least from the central part of the state. So I'm not sure why. But again, it's just a matter of folks hearing about the survey, taking upon themselves, taking time to respond, which we certainly appreciate. So folks say, why all the surveys? Why is this so important? We really, the custom rate survey that we've done for many, many years, the biennial survey, is one of the most largest or most widely read publications that University Extension puts out. And so again, this can be a good supplement to that. And it's because people are curious about the information. They like to see, if what they're paying is in line with what others are asking for, charging, and so forth. So it is a very, very popular report. And again, this is just a good supplement to that. So, and again, when they responded, they told us their county. And so again, we put those counties in the different districts and different ag statistic service districts. All right, as Jim mentioned, there were different categories, different topics, I guess, that we asked about. And so this just shows a list of what was included in the survey. So again, custom land, pasture maintenance, fencing and trenching. Again, the one of the biggest areas, or one of the differences, I think, would be in the common custom services per species. And here we asked about yardage, processing fees, different things having to do with cattle, hogs, poultry, and sheep, hauling livestock services, custom feed prep, haying and baling, custom facility rental, which really has to do with hay storage and feed storage facilities, equipment rental, and then again, manure pumping, hauling, and application. Okay. So again, how does this this report look? Again, we've summarized everything into a state summary. So we don't have it broke out by districts. But just to remind you, again, we've got the different areas highlighted. This one I just, grabbed a piece from the cattle, cows, breeding stock. This would be some of those common custom services per species, where you would have artificial insemination, preg testing, and so on. And so here we're showing, though, that we have an average rate. So all of those reporting, what was the average? And again, we mentioned here, this is a rate per head for each of these. It might be in some cases rate per head per day. It might be, again, in the case of haying, rate per ton, rate per acre, those kinds of things. But anyway, we do mention what we're talking about here as far as what that rate really means. But again, the average rate, what was the most common? If we've got that figure, that's included. And then also you can see a range. So even though we had 1183 was the average rate on the artificial insemination rate per head, the rate range was anywhere from 5 to 22, and this is the number that was reporting. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how we set that report up. Okay. I thought it might be of interest to you that we do have the 22, again, our biennial, the other custom rates report that we do. There were, again, like I mentioned, some similar questions asked on this report, those that would have more to do with livestock, pasture, again, hay rates, and so on. So I thought it might be of interest to you to see from that report to this report how those average rates may be different. So interesting enough, and I don't have the numbers of how many reported. You'd have to look at the 22 report and again the 23 report to see those numbers. But maybe we picked up a different group of folks answering the question. So the clearing of cedar trees rate per hour went from 105.83 to 96.67 on this particular report. Building new fence, you can see again rate per hour in this case. 1867 to 35. Our hauling rates, of course, that probably makes sense with costs, going up and fuel increases, going from $4 to $6 rate per loaded mile. Okay, for an 18-wheeler versus a stock trailer too, we've got that figure here. And then also our baling rates. So we do see here this large square bale rate dropped just a little bit on this particular survey, whereas our large round with and without net wrap rate per bale, those both increased. Interesting that, again, probably a different set of folks, but our skid steer rental, we do ask about some of those things. We basically had the same exact rate showing on both reports there. Again, probably different folks answering the question, I would imagine, because I think, again, we were seeking a different set of folks to, in many cases, it's hard to know. We don't know who responded to their anonymous survey, so we don't know, but, that we would get the same rate there. And then also solid manure loading and then manure application. So we had an increase at the loading side and the application rate. So again, these are just some of the rates that we could compare to our other survey, our most recent survey there. And so things do change as we go along with time, and again, with a different set of folks addressing. So again, Jim, stop me if there's any questions. I'll go ahead and keep going unless I hear from you. All right, so just thought we'd take a look at a couple, rates, how we might determine some rates if we were going to do some work and charge accordingly. So how about a fencing scenario? So again, we asked about that. And so let's say I have some fence building skills and I've done this kind of work before, and my neighbor asked me to do, build a quarter mile of fence for one of their pastures, and the job site's about 4 miles south of me. He'll supply the fencing materials and I'll be using my tools and providing the labor. So what factors should I consider in determining a rate to charge? All right, so a lot of people do turn to our custom rates reports. We did have fencing on our regular report as well as this new report. And this one said basically that you would figure about a $35 an hour as an average rate, as what folks said they paid or they charged for a 4-strand barbed wire fence with wood posts, which seems to be about the most popular, fencing arrangement, I guess, for people to ask about. So the range on this latest report goes from $20 to $50. So I could consider, well, hey, maybe I've got other things I need to do. Maybe $35 isn't enough. So you could take a look at the range, or I really like this neighbor, I'll charge less, whatever it might be. So rates were also shown on the 22 report. So basically we actually had a pretty good jump up here from 1867 was the average, which would be really close to our low here. I jumped up to 35, but again, we've had wage pressures, those kinds of things, inflation. Folks are probably, thinking about charging more. So that's what we got for an answer there, is $35 an hour. So I do quality work, and with the wages increases overall this last year, I think that $35 would work really well for me. I've got my own tools for fence building, and I've had them for a long time. They're pretty well depreciated out. I'm not really factoring in extra wear and tear on them for this job. And also, I'm also considering that, of course, this job site's a few miles away. So does that $35 an hour cover that? Well, basically, it's like as I leave my place and as I come home, I would include that time, in my charge. So, but I could, think in terms of wear and tear on my equipment, my truck, fuel charges, that kind of thing. But again, it's not that far away. And I think that $35 an hour seems pretty reasonable. Okay, just one thing that you might look at. Okay, so let's say we had some other equipment involved in our whatever. It might be a haying job. I've got another example here. But we want to make sure that we're factoring in our costs for machinery and equipment. And I've used this graphic before. I think it's really an important thing to think about, in that we have to consider the operating costs of that machinery. What is our fuel and lube costs? What's our labor as far as operating costs go? Repairs and maintenance, and even costs of supplies. So if there were, like in the fencing, if there were additional supplies I had to bring along, I'd want to make sure I covered my cost with those. All right. And then along with operating costs, then we also want to consider machinery ownership costs. And that includes, if I've got machinery, my original cost minus salvage value divided by the years of use, my depreciation, an interest or an opportunity cost of ownership. Again, a tractor can obviously amount to a lot and there's an opportunity cost of owning that equipment as well as depreciation. So again, interest, opportunity cost. I may pay some local property taxes for the ownership of that equipment. Of course, housing costs and insurance for those things are part of ownership costs. So those all should be considered as we are considering what to charge. So here's a scenario, a baling hay scenario. And so in this case, I own a 3-year-old round baler and provide custom baling services in our area. So I've got 80 acres of my own hay that I put up, but I also figure about another 80 acres of providing services. And typical annual production, per acre is about 3.5 to 4.5 tons of hay per acre. And so it was what I figure a per acre, a per ton, or a per bale charge. So what I did here then is we've got our ag budget calculator program. We could also do it longhand. We've got Excel spreadsheets where you can kind of figure cost of equipment. But I'm showing you here in this example what we would plug into the ag budget calculator program to figure on operation and ownership costs for this round baling operation. So I took some screenshots here, my tractor information. So I have my tractor and my baler. But this is the tractor information. We include a list price. We've got engineering formulas here in the program that consider formulas including the list price, my purchase price of that equipment, how old was it when I bought it, what's the tack on it, how many hours of use do I put on it myself, and I'm figuring owning that tractor another 5 years. I went ahead and entered a salvage value of 100,000 and also annual cost of repairs about 500. The program can calculate this for you, or you can actually enter your own, as I did in this case. And also I continue on, I named the tractor, it's my big red tractor, and it's got a max PTO of about 250. It's a diesel and use about 10 gallons of fuel per hour. So that's typical information that this is the information we would plug into our ag budget calculator to help us figure some costs. So this is the summary that we get back off of that. Again, the list price, we just kind of gives us information back. The repair cost would figure about $12.50 an hour, depreciation $46 an hour, and so on, fuel cost at that. Now, when we add the round baler, okay, I figure that comparable price, list price at 59,000. I bought it for 52. It was a couple years old. I'm expecting to own it about 10 years. I use it about 200 acres. Again, the engineering formulas and figuring salvage value came out that my salvage value after this period of time would be about $14,876. I added about $1,500 of repairs, which could be more or less depending on which way you kind of figure that. And I figure about 4 acres, in using that round baler for coverage rate is 4 acres per hour. Okay, so again, it's kind of spitting back to us that our repair cost is $750 an acre. Depreciation is $18.56. Okay. So when I add those things together, it gives us this report, a field operation cost report. Basically says, okay, I'm going to have labor time involved, and that was figuring in at about $25 an hour. Okay, so this is what it comes out to be per acre. So for that big red tractor, the round baler, I'm figuring $66.45. And then also I would include the supplies of the bale wrap, and I figured that at about $750 an acre. All right. Again, yours might be more or less. So I've got here a total per acre then of $73.95. So then if my total cost per acre is $73.95 and at 4.5 tons per acre, I'd be looking at $16.43 per ton. charge, if I was going to charge by a per tonnage basis, or if I was going to do per bale. And it'd say the bales are around 1,431 pounds, as was noted in our custom rates report. We asked that, so you have an idea of what kind of size bales are coming out. So anyway, we're figuring about 6.3 bales per acre, and that would be $11.83 per bale. And if you notice, this example then I think is about $5 less than what our average reported price was per bale. So again, this would just be basically covering your costs, and you might want to add more on as a profit margin, in addition to that per bale cost. So again, this would be just covering the costs kind of thing. Okay. So that, I know we were going to keep you very long today. It's kind of a short report. Hopefully it's really helpful to you to use as a guide. And we get questions often about, what should I charge? So again, keep in mind, this is a guide, but also you want to figure some of your own costs in determining what you should charge or what you should pay folks for their services. Okay. Did I cover everything, Jim?
Yeah, so I haven't seen any questions come in quite yet, Glennis. I think you had one sent to you before we started today. Maybe you could repeat that question and we could help people out with that one at least.
Yeah. Okay. So in this report, we asked about yardage fees. And so someone was looking at the report and said, well, what would I do with the yardage fees? Let's say, someone utilizes my pasture, and of course I charge for the pasture, and I'm glad Jim's on because he works on the farm real estate report. He understands, some of those rates on pastures and so on. So anyway, so how would we combine kind of what this report is telling us on yardage rates versus pasture rates? Could we combine the two, or what do you think of that, Jim?
Yeah, so when it comes to, I think those are almost two different things in itself. When we talk about yardage, there's probably some type of a confinement situation going on, especially if it's more than just a couple head of cattle, whether it's backgrounding, overwintering, something of that nature. I don't believe we have a lot of numbers reported in the livestock custom operation side on custom backgrounding or providing care in a confinement situation.
Right.
What I've told people when they've asked me this question, the amount, talk to like a local feedlot or someone that's doing backgrounding livestock. Typically the fee is for the use of their facility, possibly use of their equipment to run like a feeder wagon or something like that. And then the actual feed stuff, silage, hay, ground up hay, ground corn, whatever, that's usually another separate fee, right, or something that the owner of the livestock would provide. You would price that in accordingly to accompany that. When we talk about grazing of livestock, we typically are mentioning, at least in the farm real estate report, it's the renting of the property for the use of the grazing land. And you might hear the term taking cattle in. When you hear someone taking cattle in, that's usually a situation where they're providing additional degrees of care, especially if there's someone renting a property that's, say, several hours away from their primary operational site. Under that case, if you look at the farm real estate report, you would probably charge a rate that would be somewhere around the upper third or something that exceeds the upper third of cash rent. We are trying to report on rates in the farm real estate survey simply of renting of the property and not taking cattle in. I do feel on some of the higher numbers, though, especially out in like the North District, where you have areas of the state that can be somewhat remote, that some of those higher rates do include some kind of care, or at least a land property owner that might live by the property, maybe is kind of keeping an eye on livestock, things of that nature. Right. So that's kind of how we break that out. When it comes to the renting, and kind of on the third question on renting a livestock buildings. So something more advanced than this, say, a simple dirt lot with fencing and a water and some feed bunks. That is a number we don't have very good estimates for either. You might see people asking about those rates if they intend to stock cows out. Some of the numbers I've seen people use have been somewhat similar to the use of a property for dairy, like a dairy loafing barn or something like that. The big thing with the use of livestock facilities is that the tenant has to provide any repairs to the site if the animal caused any wear and tear, and also the cleaning of the barns or livestock lock out after the tenant is done using it. So you just describe the lease arrangement exactly what cleaning the site or it's cleaned out. So repair, maintenance, upkeep, and maybe even insurance on the facility if you are using like a simple event that would cause damage to that. Under the Q&A, the question that came in, Glennis, and I think I'll throw this back to you. Can we use DEA, D as in dog, E as in echo, A as in apple, for this analysis? Would you like to expand on that?
You're breaking up a bit there, Jim. I see the question, and what did you? I'm not quite sure what they're asking about there.
I would guess that the D might be for depreciation. I'm not exactly sure on the E or the A. The person that asked that question, if you could spell out what the abbreviation DEA means.
Okay. Yeah, I see it, but okay.
Okay.
Not quite sure. I was just going to mention too, again, when we asked about the yardage rates, we asked about those without feed charges included, and we had responses, as you can see, rate per head or rate per head per day. So we had some of those responses. But yeah, we do get a lot of questions about, what to charge for livestock facilities, and that we were hopeful that we would get more response. So again, this is our first time around with this particular survey. I think it'll be ready to go, a little easier to promote as we look to do it again in a couple years. And so, I guess keep that in mind. The more, again, we have information, the more we can provide some guidance to folks on. So data envelope analysis. I don't know. I'm stumped, Jim. I'm not sure what to.
I'm not quite sure on that one either. I would tell either call Glennis or myself. You see Glennis's contact information on this slide, so shoot her an email or maybe give her a call. It might be a little bit easier to describe that question over the phone to either one of us, or maybe Glennis if you were talking about some of the pertaining to the material covered in the slides. But
okay. All right. Anything
unless
else?
there's any other questions, I think for the crowd of people that joined us today. Oh, I'm supposed to remind everyone to thank you everyone for joining us today. A recording of this webinar will be posted at the Center for Ag Profitability website at cap.unl.edu, where you can also take a look at registering for any upcoming meetings if you see a webinar that you'd like to attend. As you close your Zoom webinar today, there will be a brief survey that appears that asks for your opinion on today's webinar and potential ideas for future sessions. Any feedback you can provide would be greatly appreciated. Thank you once again for joining us, and have a great rest of the Thursday, and great job today, Glennis. And would you like to add anything else?
Nope, thank you. I guess stay in touch if you have any thoughts, ideas, questions about the survey. That's what we're here for, to help with follow up on that. So thank you.
Very good. Thanks, everyone.